In the hidden storage room of this elderly couple, there is a teleportation portal leading to another planet. Every midnight, they would go there together to admire the beautiful night sky, yet, even though they had been here countless times, they had never stepped into that unfamiliar planet. As the couple grew older, York, the husband, decided to tell their granddaughter the secret of the planetary teleportation portal. However, his wife Irene opposed this idea. She wanted to personally confirm that this alien space wouldn't pose a threat to them. Before considering telling the family, York felt a bit troubled by this, because they had conducted an experiment before, releasing a mouse into the alien space. The mouse died right after stepping out of the spatial gate. Although the elderly couple went out every midnight, this unusual behavior still attracted the neighbors' attention. After all, it seemed odd for two elderly people to keep walking into the woods in the middle of the night. The next morning, York took Irene to the hospital for a regular physical examination. While waiting for Irene's examination, York went to the supermarket to buy daily necessities. Irene's physical examination results were not very good. She had fallen once before, and her physical condition had deteriorated significantly since then. Moreover, being over 70 years old, it was estimated that her time left was limited. After buying the things, York dragged the shopping bags back home. He called out for a long time but got no response from Irene, only then realizing that he had left his wife at the hospital. By the time he rushed to the hospital, it was already dark. Irene was still sitting in a wheelchair, waiting for her husband to pick her up. In the face of her husband's forgetfulness, she didn't blame him. After all, York's health was also poor. He suffered from severe amnesia and often forgot what he was doing. York had forgotten to refuel the car, so the couple was delayed on their way home. Noticing that no one was in the neighboring yard, the neighbor decided to go for a walk in the woods, where the elderly couple went every night, to see what exactly was there. Filled with curiosity, the neighbor walked into the woods and found a wooden house there, but it looked just like an ordinary storage shed. He searched carefully but found nothing special. After returning home at night, the couple quickly went back to their room to rest, unaware that a huge storm was approaching in that mysterious alien space. In the middle of the night, Irene sat up from the bed. Considering that her days were numbered, she decided to explore what exactly was in that alien space by herself, even if she had to sacrifice her own life. She left a letter for York, then went to the underground passage of the wooden house. Just as she was about to open the alien gate, a noise came from behind her. A strange man was lying on the ground, groaning in pain. Obviously, he was injured. Irene took the man back home and even cleared a room for him to stay in. But York noticed something unusual. Although the man was covered in blood, there were no wounds on his body. The blood wasn't his, but with so much blood on him, he might still be a dangerous person. Irene told him she had found the man in the alien space, and that he might have come from that planet. Nevertheless, York still chose to call the police. The police soon arrived at their home to investigate. However, after searching around, they found nothing. Irene quickly stepped forward to explain that her husband suffered from severe amnesia and sometimes had hallucinations. She said they were afraid the police had made a trip for nothing this time. Irene managed to send the police away. After that, the two of them began to check the bag the man had with him. Inside were only a worn-out looking book and a few ancient-looking gold coins. Just then, there was a sound coming from the room where the man was resting. The two hurried in to check and found the man was burning up. Obviously, he had a high fever. Irene told York to go to the pharmacy downtown to get medicine, on the pretext of having a cold himself. However, while buying the medicine, York learned from the doctor about Irene's current weak physical condition. Irene stayed at home and continued to look through the man's bag. She also found a photo inside. In the photo, a man was holding a child. At this moment, she remembered that when she was sick as a child, her grandmother would always make ginger tea for her. So she went to the kitchen and made some ginger tea for the man too. After drinking the ginger tea, the man regained some consciousness. Irene asked him where he was from. The man only remembered his name was Jude. He couldn't remember anything else. When York got home, he found Irene right away, and blamed her for not telling him the truth about her physical condition. That night, York went to Jude's room, and questioned whether he had really forgotten everything. He still didn't fully trust Jude, but his wife always defended Jude, so he hoped that no matter what, Jude would at least not hurt his wife. After York left, Jude felt his bag and realized something seemed to be missing from it. So he got up, went to the kitchen, and took a knife. Then he locked himself in the bathroom, and used the knife to cut open the skin on his leg. He pulled out a blue transistor from under the skin. Jude smashed the transistor, pulled out the metal wire inside, and threw it into the sink nearby. He didn't even bandage his wound. He just dragged his injured leg and walked into the wooden house in the backyard. The next morning, the first thing York did after waking up was take Jude's gold coins to get them appraised. The appraiser told him that these gold coins were from the 17th century Spanish royal family. They were an extremely rare type of currency. He didn't know where to find such currency at the moment either. and would need some time to investigate further. Meanwhile, Irene noticed something strange at home too. The chandelier at the door of Jude's room would always flicker for no reason. Irene originally thought it was due to old and faulty wiring, and didn't pay much attention to it, until she found a glowing orb inside a bottle in the storage cabinet. Jude was taking a bath in the inner room at the time, and just one night, the wound on his leg had already healed. It seemed that Jude's identity wasn't ordinary. Meanwhile, York found the knife Jude had used in the mirror cabinet in the bathroom. There was still blood on it. He knew right then that Jude was definitely not a good person. He was about to take the knife to tell Irene about this, but when he walked into the living room, he swallowed the words that were already on the tip of his tongue. The living room was bathed in warm yellow light. Irene sat by the sofa, and Jude was sitting beside her, reading to her. Ever since they lost their son in middle age, York hadn't seen his wife so happy in a long time. In fact, Irene wasn't foolish either. She couldn't help but notice Jude's oddities. For example, Jude never watched TV, and he also found many foods in the kitchen strange and interesting, as if he didn't belong to this world. Moreover, Irene had secretly examined the glowing orb. The moment she opened the bottle and placed the orb on the coffee table disappeared. Frightened, she hurriedly put the orb away, and realized that this was definitely not an object from Earth. She didn't press Jude. Instead, she told him that he could tell her whenever he was ready. Jude sincerely thanked Irene for her understanding, and asked why she was being so kind to him. Irene told him about losing her son in middle age, and told Jude that shortly after her son passed away, she had discovered the stargate. She thought there must be some kind of sign from fate in this. Now, when she looked at Jude, it was like seeing her own son. After this conversation, Jude seemed to remember something too. He remembered that when he was very young, his father had left him, and that his coming here seemed to be for the sake of finding his father. As he spoke, he also took out a photo, exactly the one Irene had found earlier in Jude's bag. It turned out that the man in the photo was Jude's father. Although his wife got along well with Jude, York still didn't trust him. He made an excuse to take Jude out, and finally gave him a sum of money, telling Jude to leave quickly. York thought Jude was a liar, and that if he stayed at home, he would bring trouble sooner or later. Moreover, even if Jude had no ill intentions, he would still leave sooner or later. After all, they weren't real family, and the longer time passed, the deeper Irene's feelings for Jude would become. When they parted, Irene would feel even more distressed, but Jude didn't take a single cent and walked straight towards the station. York was a soft-hearted person. Looking at Jude's pitiful back, he called him back. He decided to go back and discuss the matter of sending Jude away in detail later, because York had withdrawn a sum of money to give to Jude as travel expenses. Their granddaughter received a text message from the bank, and came to the door to find Irene, asking if York had been scammed. At this moment, York happened to return home with Jude. Considering that Jude's identity was hard to explain, Irene had to lie to her granddaughter, saying that Jude was a caregiver they had hired. The granddaughter didn't have too many doubts and left after dinner. During this time, the neighbor came to the storage room again. This time, he found the secret passage, and discovered the spatial teleportation portal in the passage. The scene then shifts to a dilapidated church, where a sweet-looking girl is on a date with her first boyfriend. The teenage girl, who had just begun to feel romantic feelings, thought she had met true love. Little did she know that the boy wasn't dating her sincerely. Instead, he was doing it for a bet with his friends, to prove he had the courage to enter a haunted house. It turns out that this girl had been living in a sparsely populated suburb, and the reason why she lived there was because her mother had to guard this church. Before the girl could react to the fact that she had been tricked, her mother Kate suddenly appeared, and blamed her for bringing someone into the church without permission. Then she drove the boy away. The next morning, Kate was ready to send her daughter to school, but she waited in the living room for a long time, and still didn't see her daughter come out of the bedroom. She went in to check, and found out that her daughter had run away from home overnight. To avoid punishment, Kate hurriedly drove to chase after her, caught up with her daughter on the way, and took her to a breakfast. Tony didn't understand her mother's actions. They had lived here for so many years, guarding this so-called sacred church, but she couldn't figure out what exactly there was to guard in this shabby church that had neither a priest nor worshippers. Kate had to tell Tony that what they really needed to guard wasn't the church, but a special item, and that this kind of guardianship had lasted for more than 300 years. Just then, Kate's phone sent a notification that someone had broken into their house. Kate hurriedly took Tony back home, pulled out a handgun, and carefully pushed open the front door. David was sitting at their dining table, not showing the slightest sign of panic of an intruder. Tony didn't know this man, but Kate put away her handgun after seeing who it was, and told Tony to go back to her bedroom. She sat down at the dining table and talked with David. David asked Kate if she had already told her daughter the truth. Kate said her daughter had her own life and that she hadn't told her anything yet. After listening, David handed Kate a mission card. He stated that it was a special mission that needed to be completed by Kate together with Tony. He also reminded Kate that Tony wasn't just her daughter, but also the future Guardian successor. After doing all this, David left Kate's house that night. Kate, looking at the mission card in her hand, realized it was time to tell her daughter the truth. She told Tony to pack her luggage as they were going on a long trip, because of guarding this church. Tony had never been anywhere else. The sudden trip made her very excited. She quickly packed her luggage and got ready to get in the car, but Kate changed direction, and said they didn't need any means of transportation this time. She took Tony into the church's basement and pulled a mysterious switch. It turned out that this was what they were really guarding. The switch was connected to a stargate. Kate entered a few strange characters on the switch, then took her daughter by the hand and walked in. As a white light flashed, the two of them appeared in a room resembling an elevator shaft. Next to it was a very tall ladder leading upwards. They climbed up the ladder and arrived at a strange piece of land. Kate told Tony that this place was no longer Mexico, but New York, thousands of miles away. A man stood not far away, waving at Kate. Kate explained that he was also a member of their Guardian organization. This was the first time Tony had ever experienced something that only happens in sci-fi movies. Even after waking up the next day, she still felt like it was a dream. The Guardian in New York took Kate and her daughter to a factory building, which had many electronic devices inside. Kate handed her mission card to the Guardian. The Guardian then inserted the card into a computer. Four sets of data appeared on the computer screen. The Guardian then took out a roll of map. He used the data on the screen to identify a certain area. Kate needed to find someone within this area. To make it easier for Kate to find the person, her colleague also prepared a mobile search vehicle for her, and the place Kate needed to go to was exactly the area where Jude and the Yorks lived. On the other side, Jude was tackled to the ground. He was so frightened that he woke up instantly. It turned out that what had just happened was just a dream. After getting up, Jude found no one at home, so he carried a bag of things and went to the woods in the backyard. He dug a hole in the ground and buried the things inside, and the thing he buried was exactly the glowing orb that Irene had found a couple of days earlier. When Jude returned home, York was waiting for him at home. Some time ago, he learned from Irene that Jude had come on this trip to look for his father. He was going to take Jude to the police station today to find the whereabouts of his father using the photo. When they arrived at the police station, the staff began to help Jude search for information. However, York went to the police officer's office. Since he still hadn't let his guard down around Jude, he told the police that he had found a bloodstained knife hidden by Jude in the bathroom cabinet. He thought Jude might be a terrorist. After saying this, York also took out the cup Jude had used, hoping the police could investigate Jude's identity through DNA testing. Given that Irene had told the police last time that her husband suffered from amnesia, the police didn't take York's words seriously, and even thought these were all hallucinations of York's. York felt his dignity had been insulted and had to leave. However, this trip wasn't fruitless. Someone from the archives department told Jude through the photo that more than 20 years ago, the man in the photo had been arrested for wandering in the park. The man had amnesia and couldn't remember anything. The police couldn't do anything with him and finally released him. As for where the man went afterwards, they had no idea either. After returning home, a former student of Irene's happened to come to visit her. The student was unemployed and wanted to work as a caregiver at Irene's house to take care of the couple, but Irene said they already had Jude. The student had no choice but to leave Irene's house. That night, Jude was just about to cook dinner when the home phone rang. He answered the call, and it was the owner of the pawn shop on the other end. Earlier, York had taken the gold coins for appraisal, and now the appraisal result was out. The owner thought Jude was York's son, and told him that he had found an appraisal expert who had clues about the gold coins. So Jude took the initiative to make an appointment with the owner, and planned to bring his own things to meet the expert. But when he rummaged through his bag, he found that all his things were gone. He remembered the female student who had come to visit Irene during the day. She had gone to the bathroom before leaving. It was probably at that time that the female student had taken his things away. He found the business card the female student had left during the day, and planned to ask her to get his things back. But Jude was not familiar with the town and soon got lost. Jude passed by a bar and went in, planning to ask the waiter for directions. Unexpectedly, he met Irene's granddaughter here. The granddaughter enthusiastically invited Jude to have a drink together. Jude didn't know how to refuse and had to agree. When Irene got up to go to the bathroom at night, she found Jude wasn't at home. She thought Jude had left quietly, so she drove along the road to look for him. At this time, Jude, who was drunk, was mistaken for a homeless person by the patrolling police. The police told Jude to stop, but Jude remembered the scene where he was being chased before. He ran as fast as he could, which instead aroused the police's suspicion. When Irene drove past, she happened to see Jude being pinned down on the police car by the police. At the same time, York went to the billiard hall to relieve his anger and let off steam. He happened to run into his next door neighbor. The two played billiards together until late at night and drank a lot of alcohol. After drinking, the neighbor asked York where the strange passage in the backyard storage room led. Although York had been drinking, his mind was still clear. He said it was just an ordinary passage and there was nothing interesting to see. The neighbor pressed on, saying that if it was just an ordinary passage, there should be no problem with showing him. Otherwise he would report the matter to the police. York had no choice but to take the neighbor to the alien gate. The two stood on the spatial teleportation platform. But the expected teleportation did not happen. The neighbor thought York was making fun of him, so he went home in a huff, even wondering if York really had a delusional disorder. On the other side, Irene was at the police station dealing with Jude's case. Jude had been arrested as a homeless person. Irene could bail him out, but on the condition that Jude told her the entire truth. Jude knew Irene wouldn't frame him, so he told her that he was from an ancient and mysterious organization. To avoid being discovered, their base was hidden in a remote location. There were also many alien creatures there. To protect the base, all members of the organization were under strict control, and the reason he had run away was to find his father. Irene chose to believe Jude and used her connections to bail him out. On the way home, Jude said he had not come here for no reason. He could feel that there were things left by his father in this town. In addition, Jude also told Irene that the female student had taken his things. Irene promised Jude that she would take him to the female student's house to get his things back as soon as dawn broke the next day. Because the stargate teleportation had failed, York was depressed all night, especially since the neighbor had also said he had a delusional disorder, which dealt another blow to York's self-esteem. He took out a camera and gave it to the neighbor, telling him to develop the photos inside. Then the neighbor would know that what he had said wasn't a lie. Irene also kept her promise, and took Jude to the female student's house early the next morning. Irene was in charge of chatting with the female student to distract her, while Jude went from the backyard to the second floor. In a room filled with clutter, he found the iron block he had lost and also discovered a broken tracker. Could it be that the female student was also a member of the organization? On the way back to town, Jude looked at the broken tracker, and was certain that it belonged to his father. The one he had taken out of his leg earlier was exactly the tracker that the organization had implanted. At the same time, the neighbor had the photos and the camera developed. After seeing the photo of Irene standing in front of the alien gate, the neighbor realized that York didn't have a delusional disorder. He went back home and started searching for information related to the Stargate. Unexpectedly, he actually found some clues. He discovered that such Stargates had already appeared more than 300 years ago, and many people were obsessed with them. The neighbor brought his latest findings and went to the Stargate with York again. After careful inspection, they found a protrusion next to the gate. When they pulled it out, it turned out to be a mechanism that looked like a hard drive. York and Irene had never noticed in over 20 years that this mechanism could be pulled out. This mechanism seemed to be missing a part, which was obviously the key reason why the Stargate wasn't working. The two wondered where to find this part. But unexpectedly, a few days later, the neighbor found a patch of strange soil in the woods. While walking his dog, the branches above the soil were all floating in the air. The neighbor dug up the soil and found the glowing orb that Jude had buried inside. This must be the missing part of the mechanism. The neighbor installed the glowing orb on the mechanism, but the mechanism still showed no response. It seemed that besides finding the part, he also needed to figure out how to activate the mechanism. The neighbor found a generator and started his experiment. On Jude's side, he had found a clue about his father, but Irene couldn't go with him, because she was unwell. However, her granddaughter was happy to go with Jude. The two drove to the place where Jude had found the clue, and there was only an old man there. When Jude took out the tracker, the old man recognized it at a glance, and said it actually belonged to his own father. Back then, his father was a truck driver. Jude's father was being chased by a van at that time. To escape the pursuit, Jude's father took out his own tracker, and handed it to the truck driver for safekeeping. That was why he recognized this item. As for Jude's father, after he was released from the police station back then, he headed to Mississippi. After learning this clue, Irene and her granddaughter accompanied Jude to investigate, leaving only York at home. The neighbor's experiment also succeeded. He successfully connected the circuit. A silent shockwave spread out in all directions, and all living creatures in the affected areas died instantly. Kate also sensed the power of the shockwave, and excitedly told her daughter that they had found the person they were looking for. York and the neighbor activated the teleportation platform, and arrived in the alien space. Looking at the magical scenery outside the window, the neighbor widened his eyes. After learning that the door beside them led to the alien planet, he decided to go out and take a look. Stepping through this unknown door was also York's wish. As early as 10 years ago, he had designed a simple spacesuit. Unfortunately, he never had the courage to actually take that step, let alone let his wife take the risk of going in. But now, with the neighbor's company, they decided to enter the alien space today to explore it. According to the clue provided by the informant, Jude found the place his father had been to before, and it turned out to be a hotel. Jude took out his father's photo, and the hotel owner said he did know Jude's father, but didn't know where he had gone now. The group planned to stay at the hotel for a night before leaving, but Irene's intuition told her that something was not right with this hotel. She told Jude to be on guard against the boss, and unexpectedly, her guess was correct. Ever since they appeared at the hotel, their movements had been under surveillance. It turned out that the boss belonged to a resistance organization. The earlier news about finding an expert who could appraise the gold coins, the clue that was passed to Jude, was false information sent by someone the boss had dispatched. Jude stayed in the room his father had lived in, and on the bookshelf in the room, he found a book identical to the one in his own bag. The book had many notes written in it and a strange note tucked inside. The next morning, Jude and his group were ready to leave. The boss didn't stop them on the surface, but secretly sent someone to follow them. On the other side, York, who had already put on the spacesuit, chose to back out 1 second before going out. He was still worried that something might happen to him. After all, his wife Irene was not in good health either, and he could not help but stay by her side. The neighbor expressed understanding for York's choice, then walked out of the Stargate alone. At first, the two could still communicate via radio, and they could see each other's situation through the window. The neighbor seemed perfectly fine, and even told York that he had found a table made on Earth here. But when the neighbor walked out of his sight, York began to feel a little panicked, until a cry of surprise came from the other side, and then there was no more news. When Jude and the others got home, York sat alone in the living room. In a daze, Jude tried to strike up a conversation but was rejected by York. He had to go back to his own room and take out the book he found at the inn, and translated it word by word according to the alien script diagram on the first page, only to find that the message left on this note was information about a teleportation point. Kate and her group located the town where Jude was staying by following the direction of the shockwave. They put up missing person notices everywhere, but Jude was usually well protected by Irene, so the missing person notices didn't work. Tony couldn't help, so she lay in the inn playing with her phone, unexpectedly coming across a video of Jude singing while drunk. They hurried to the bar shown in the video. The bar owner provided them with a business card that Jude had left there at that time. However, this wasn't Jude's business card, but rather the business card of the female student Jude had been looking for earlier. They followed the address on the business card to find that female student, and ask about Jude's whereabouts. The female student was unemployed, staying at home, and had no income. When she heard that someone wanted to inquire about Jude's information, she wanted to make some money through the clues she had. She offered a high price of $3,000. Kate naturally wouldn't give it to her, but she also didn't want to solve the problem by force, so she had to first take Tony back to the inn. Unexpectedly, as soon as she walked in, she found David waiting there. After learning that Kate didn't want to spend a high price to buy the information, David told Kate to take him to find that female student. He threw a bag of gold coins to the female student, and told her to reveal Jude's whereabouts. But the female student became greedy and pushed her luck, raising the price again. Unfortunately, not everyone was as reasonable as Kate. David went straight up and grabbed the female student by the throat. After the female student hurriedly revealed the information, David snapped her neck, and ordered Kate to set a fire to burn the female student's body. Kate and her group soon arrived outside Irene's house. According to the address provided by the female student, they parked their car not far away. David got out to check and found the bodies of dead birds. This made him more certain that there must be a Stargate nearby. It turned out that they had been searching for the entrance to such a Stargate for many years, and only Jude knew this information. The organization David belonged to had always controlled the right to use the Stargate. Jude and his father had also been members of this organization, but they were unwilling to be oppressed and enslaved for a long time, so they chose to remove their trackers and defect from the organization with the Stargate parts. This was also the reason why Jude was being hunted down. Just then, Jude happened to drive out. David saw him right away, and ordered Kate to take charge of chasing and hunting Jude. David took Tony into Irene's house, preparing to kidnap Irene's family and use them as a bargaining chip to threaten Jude. After finding the information about the teleportation gate, Jude decided to go alone to look for other clues. He went out today to say goodbye to Irene's granddaughter. As soon as the two met, gunshots were heard. Jude knew it was the organization's men coming after him, and told Irene's granddaughter to leave quickly, while he rushed out to draw fire. The granddaughter originally wanted to go to Irene for help, but as soon as she entered Irene's house, she was also captured by David as a hostage. David extracted the location of the Stargate from them, then he handed a gun to Tony and told her to keep an eye on them, while he himself went to look for the Stargate. As soon as David left, Irene began to persuade Tony to untie them. Tony was still young, not to mention she had just learned about the organization. Before long, her resolve wavered. After listening to Irene, she planned to untie him. But David returned at this moment and directly brainwashed Tony. Then he called Kate and asked her to pass on a message to Jude. The lives of Irene's family were now in his hands. If he wanted them to live, he had to come back. Jude didn't want Irene to get hurt because of him. He chose to go back with Kate. Seeing that Kate had brought Jude back, David handed a pistol to Tony, telling her to shoot and kill Jude in one go. Tony didn't dare to shoot someone to kill. Kate also didn't want her daughter to have blood on her hands. She snatched the pistol and decided to be the villain herself. but looking at Tony's terrified eyes, she didn't want her daughter to see her ruthless side. Just then, York, who had already broken free, seized the opportunity, suddenly made a move, and Jude also took the chance to fight back against David. York picked up Irene's walking stick and knocked David to the ground. Kate then stunned the fallen David with electricity, tied him up, and threw him into the trunk. It turned out that she had long disliked David, but since David was her superior, she could only obey his orders. Kate drove away from the town. She told her daughter that by hurting David today, they had betrayed the organization, and their lives from now on wouldn't be peaceful. On the way, the car Kate was driving was forced to stop. A woman got out of the car opposite, and it turned out to be the former innkeeper. After seeing Kate, her first words were to ask about Kate's identity, whether she was a guardian of the Stargate. Then she opened the trunk, and couldn't help but smirk when she saw David with a bleeding head. Then she ordered her subordinates to put a hood over David's head, and took them back to her base. On the other side, Jude was ready to leave Earth. Irene's granddaughter decided to go with him, so the two packed their luggage and went to the Stargate. Jude took out the ion block and placed it on the switch. The glowing disc then turned into a controller. He entered the coordinates according to the instructions on the note. Then, he disappeared into the teleportation gate together with Irene's granddaughter. Everything seemed to have settled down. York only then told Irene about the neighbor's accidental disappearance after entering the Stargate. To find out what had happened, this time it was York's turn to put on the spacesuit. He stepped into the Stargate under the gaze of his wife Irene. He found the missing coffee table from his home. Among the space debris scattered all over the ground, it turned out that the coffee table Irene had made disappear with the glowing orb earlier had been teleported here. No wonder the neighbor had said he saw a table made on Earth here. York walked farther and farther until he was out of Irene's sight. Only then did York discover a corpse. There was a dagger stuck in the corpse's chest. But this corpse wasn't the neighbor. It was a man York didn't know. He had no idea that the dead man in front of him was one of the people who had been chasing Jude. Jude might really be from this planet. York felt that the oxygen in his helmet was getting thinner and thinner. He picked up the gauge on the oxygen tank and saw that the tank was leaking. He fell to the ground. He used his last bit of strength to try to leave a final message for his wife via the walkie-talkie, but in his dizziness, he saw Irene appear right in front of him. She even took off his helmet and told him to breathe easily. York originally thought this was his life flashing before his eyes, but after his breathing stabilized, he realized that the Irene in front of him was real. What's more, this planet could actually support human life. They went to a hillside and spotted a grand alien city not far away. Night Sky is a sci-fi drama series released by Amazon in 2022. With its unique narrative perspective and profound emotional core, it stands out among numerous sci-fi works. This drama tells the story of an elderly couple whose peaceful life is completely upended after they discover a wormhole hidden in their backyard, one that leads to an alien world. Unlike most sci-fi works, Night Sky uses sci-fi elements as a vehicle to explore human nature, loneliness, and the meaning of life, rather than a gimmick to show off technical prowess. One of the most striking features of Night Sky is its choice of an elderly couple as the protagonists of a sci-fi story. This is truly rare in sci-fi films and television shows. The couple is brilliantly portrayed by Oscar winners J.K. Simmons and Sissy Spacek. They deliver a realistic and touching portrayal of what elderly life is like. Their health is gradually declining, and the pain of losing their only son lingers on. Their daily lives are filled with trivial medical procedures and elderly care plans. The setting of the backyard wormhole injects a touch of mystery into the couple's ordinary life. For years, they have kept this secret, occasionally passing through the passage to watch the stars on that unfamiliar desert planet. This has become a way for them to escape the pain of reality. As shown in the series, this wormhole is not only a physical passage, but also a psychological sanctuary for the couple, to escape the pain of losing their son and the difficulties of life. When a blood-soaked stranger appeared on the other side of the wormhole, the peaceful life of the elderly couple was disrupted. The arrival of the stranger forced the couple to re-examine the secret they had kept for years, and also indirectly pushed them to face the emotional trauma they had been avoiding. Simmons and Spacek's performances vividly depict the complex relationship between the elderly couple, one that is both dependent and independent. York seems to have accepted the reality of living a plain life until old age. While Irene still harbors a desire to explore the unknown, the director chose to use sci-fi elements as a medium to explore the predicaments of elderly life, and this approach makes Night Sky unique in the sci-fi genre. The most touching moments in this series are often not sci-fi spectacles, but the subtle interactions between the elderly couple, a worried glance, a wordless act of support, or a shared memory of their late son. In short, Night Sky is a unique work that is difficult to categorize simply. It has the outer shell of a sci-fi drama but encapsulates the core of a family drama. It tells a story of alien exploration, yet most movingly portrays everyday life on Earth. It centers on elderly characters, but explores existential dilemmas common to all age groups. The greatest success of this series lies in its balance between genre elements and humanistic care. The sci-fi setting isn't an end in itself, but a tool to explore human nature, through the characters of York and Irene, the series demonstrates the fragility and dignity of old age, the pain of loss, and the courage to move forward. When Irene decides to cross the wormhole to explore the unknown, this act goes beyond a simple adventure story, and becomes a poetic rebellion of humanity in the face of life's finiteness. The slow pace and elderly perspective of Night Sky may deter some viewers, but those willing to invest patience will be rewarded with an emotionally rich and thought-provoking artistic work. At a time when sci-fi films and television are increasingly inclined toward grand narratives and visual spectacles, Night Sky offers a different possibility. Sci-fi can also be a mirror, reflecting the deepest loneliness and longings of the human soul. It reminds us that the best sci-fi stories are ultimately about people, no matter how distant the galaxy in which they are set. For viewers who enjoy thought-provoking sci-fi, Night Sky is undoubtedly a work worth savoring carefully. It may not make your adrenaline surge, but it will likely leave a lasting echo in your heart, just like the brightest stars in the night sky, quietly but enduringly shining with light.